Do Nigerian politicians get paid too much? Before I even start talking about this, I'm going to say from the beginning that yes, Nigerian politicians get paid way too much, especially given the fact that they do absolutely nothing for the Nigerian people. But how much is too much, and how do their salaries compare to other countries? Believe it or not, despite the current state of the nation, for instance, Nigeria being the poverty capital of the world, the recent flooding as a result of poor planning, dilapidated infrastructure, food insecurity, and inflation, to be honest with you, the list is endless, but you get the idea. Despite this, Nigeria spends about 75% of its budget paying salaries and servicing the government since 2011. I promise, I'm not making this up. Knowing this, it's no surprise the state of everything else in the country. The country is in such a bad state because there's no money left to spend on anything else after servicing the government and paying salaries. To be honest with you, one can say servicing the government is the biggest liability to the Nigerian people and also the biggest order to real progress in the country. Because if we can free up more percentage of our budget, perhaps, and maybe perhaps we could spend this money on infrastructure and real development. Let's start with the top position, the President of the Federation. The Nigerian president gets about 14 million annually. This is about 31,000 US dollars. Please take note this figure is the total amount after the current president slashed his salary by 50%. So in essence, the real figure would have been twice this amount, which is still modest at first glance, especially when compared to other nations in the world. But this does not include other perks and allowances, which are some of the highest in the world. In fact, looking at the basic salary of our leaders can be very, very misleading. The true figures becomes clearer when you look at the total amount received for their respective offices. Let's look at some of their basic salary. Our vice president receives 12 million, while our senator gets about 12.7 million. Members of the House of Representatives receive about 9.5 million naira, while ministers receive 7.8 million naira. The Minister of State receives the basic salary of a minister, which is 7.8 million, plus an additional 7.5 million naira. The Senate President receives the basic salary of a senator, which is about 12.7 million, plus an additional 8.6 million. The Deputy Senate President receives the basic salary of a senator, which is 12.7 million naira, plus an additional 8 million naira. The Speaker of the House of Representatives receives the basic salary of a member of the House, which is about 9.5 million, plus an additional 4.9 million. The Deputy Speaker of the House of Rep receives the basic salary of a member of the House of Rep, which is about 9.5 million, plus an additional 4.5 million naira annually. These figures are annually. Again, most of this basic salary appears very modest until you realize the average lawmakers makes about $150,000 to $190,000, well, depending on exchange rate, when bonuses and allowance are factored in. And like I mentioned earlier, the true total cost of these folks amount to a very huge chunk of our annual budget. To be honest with you, most people in most countries are of the opinion that politicians get paid way too much. For example, the American president gets paid $400,000, whereas the median salary in America is $92,000. The Canadian president receives about $265,000, and the Australian leader, the Prime Minister, gets about $550,000 annually, US dollar. And this is the main point. In proportion to the size of the economy and the percentage of their budget, it is nothing really, especially when you look at the median salary in each of the country. Well, Australia is a bit on the high side, but it's still a lot better than Nigeria. Let's look at the median salaries in a few of these countries compared to the average salary of their lawmakers, and let's see how Nigeria compares. The median salary is different from the average salary. It is a better figure to look at to avoid being misled by high earners. So I'll explain. For example, a country of 5 people, let's say 4 of them each earn $10, and maybe the 5th person earns about $500. The average or the mean would be about $108. The earning of the person receiving $500 would skew the result and make it look as if every other person is earning a lot. Whereas if you use the median of the same set of figures, the median would be $10, which is just the figure of the middle number if arranged in a row. It simply means that half of the population earns less than the median and the other half earns more than the median. With that out of the way, The median salary in the US is $92,800. Their lawmakers receive an average of about $173,000, which is about 1.7 times more than half of the country. The median salary in Canada is 83,000 US dollars. The average lawmaker receives an average of $178,000, which is about 2.2 more than half of the country. The median salary in Australia is about 60,000 US dollars. The average lawmaker receives an average of 193,000 US dollars, which is about 3.3 times half of the country. The median salary in Nigeria is 4 million naira annually, according to Salary Explorer. I personally think this figure is very inaccurate, but let's assume this figure is about 9,000 US dollars annually. The average Nigerian lawmaker makes 18 times the median salary in the country. Any country serious about any kind of real reform would definitely not be spending 75% of their budget servicing the government and paying salaries, leaving very little for other important sectors like roads, hospitals, universities, especially given the fact that a huge percentage of the money used in funding our annual budget is borrowed money. So in essence, we're borrowing money to pay our politicians. This just goes to show how unserious our government is. Hey guys, please support us by sharing this video with friends and families, and also please subscribe to our channel and follow us on social media at the Open Letter NG.